Hello friends, welcome to Social Topper. Today, myself Pranav Suchindran will be teaching you the first chapter in Class 10 Social Science History, that is the rise of nationalism in Europe. This is the second part of the chapter. So as I said earlier, the explanatory sessions for this chapter will be coming in four parts. The first part has already been uploaded, so this is the second session. So let's get started. So the first topic for today's session is the age of revolutions. The time frame of this event is between 1830 to 1848. So during that time, the two main groups in Europe were the conservatives and the liberalism and nationalists. So the nationalists who supported liberalism. The liberals were against the conservatives and later on they became the revolutionaries. So slowly, those who opposed the conservative regime, that is the liberals, they slowly started revolutions and protests against the monarchical regime and became the revolutionaries. In furtherance on their motive, three revolutions occurred during this time frame: the July Revolution, the Belgian Revolution, and the Greece Revolution. The Greece Revolution is also referred to as the Greek War of Independence. Revolution was led by the educated middle class, along with the commercial middle class and the liberal nationalists. So now let's see in detail about all the three revolutions. First, the July Revolution in the year 1830 happened in France. So what happened was the Bourbon king who ruled them was deposed and Louis Philippe was made their constitutional head. This upheaval took place in the month of July in the year 1830 in France. Now let us come to the revolution at Brussels. After seeking the July Revolution, the Belgian people started another revolution in Brussels, and the outcome of that was they broke away and came out of the United Kingdom of Netherlands. Now, let us look at the Greek War of Independence. It was an event that mobilized nationalist feeling among the educated elite across Europe. Greece had been part of Ottoman Empire since the 15th century. So, for more than 200 to 300 years, they were ruled by the Ottoman Empire. The growth of revolutionary nationalism in Europe sparked off a struggle for independence amongst the Greece, which began in 1821. So, way before your July Revolution and the revolution at Brussels, uh, this Greek War of Independence had already started. Nationalists in Greece got support from other Greeks living in exile and also from many Western Europeans who had sympathies for ancient Greek culture. So, when we look at the culture of Greece, it had a very diverse culture and it was well known to the world. So, because of this, for the Greek War of Independence, people or the Greek people who lived in exile and the Western Europeans supported. Poets and artists lauded Greece as the cradle of European civilization and mobilized public opinion to support its struggle against the Muslim empire. So, when we look at the Ottoman Empire, it is a Muslim empire. So these Greeks who lived in and around Greece were mostly Christians. So they had to fight against an empire which was not of their religion and which was of another religion, that was Muslim. The English poet Lord Byron organized funds and later went to fight in the war, where he died of fever in the year 1824. So Lord Byron was one of the key leaders uh, who played an important role in the Greek War of Independence during the initial phase. Because in the year 1824 he died of fever. So what he did was he organized a lot of funds. Lord Byron was a famous English poet and he has written many poems which are very famous up to date. So he organized funds and he himself went to fight in the war. in the later phase, and in the year 1824, unfortunately, he died of fever. Finally, the Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized Greece as an independent nation. So finally, in the year 1832, the Greek War of Independence came to an end, and finally they got independence. Uh, the Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized that Greece is a separate nation. This final statement, if you look uh, keenly, if you observe keenly, you can find here that three MCQs can be asked from this one single line. First, which treaty recognized Greece as an independent nation? That can be asked as a question. In which year it was recognized? Can be asked as a question. Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized Dash as an independent nation can also be asked. These are often asked as MCQs. Now let's move on to the next slide. So the next topic in this chapter is the romantic imagination and national feeling. The development of nationalism did not come about only through wars and territorial expansion. Culture played an important role in creating the idea of the nation. So how? So when they say culture also played a key role in developing the feeling of nationalism, how it happened? It happened through many elements like art, poetry, stories, music, dramas, plays, etc. These elements helped the nationalists to express and shape nationalist feelings such that they gather sufficient support from the public. What is Romanticism? It is a cultural movement which sought to develop a particular form of nationalist sentiment through arts, poetry, stories, music, plays, dramas, etc. People who contribute to it are known as romantic artists. They are also known as romantic nationalists. These romantics, they shared a common heritage, common culture, and they gave more importance to mystical feelings. Uh, they focused more on emotions, intuitions, and mystical feelings, and they criticized the glorification of reasoning and science. So this can be asked as a 3 mark or 5 mark question. So if they ask, all these points have to be covered and they should be justified in a brief manner. Now let us look at one such romantic nationalist who was Johann Gottfried Herder. He was a German philosopher. He gave two main concepts. One was Das Volk and the other is Volksgesicht. Culture can only be seen among common people. This is the definition of Das Volk, and Volksgesicht is a term which refers to the true spirit of the nation. He played a key role in collecting and recording various forms of folk culture, which was very essential to the project of nation building. So, this is a picture of Mr. Johann Gottfried Herder. The emphasis on vernacular, that is local language, and the collection of local folklore was used to recover an ancient nationalist spirit, and it was very essential to carry the modern nationalist message to large audiences who were mostly illiterate. So to the illiterate people, through these ways we can carry the message of nationalism and we can develop national sentiments among them. So this is what he did, and he was able to gather popular support. How did language play a key role? So there is a spelling mistake here. How did language play a key role in developing the feeling of nationalism? This is again a 3 mark or 5 mark question. So during the 18th century, Poland was partitioned by great powers Prussia, Austria, and Russia. So as we discussed in our first session in the topic of the Vienna Congress, what happened was one of the main feature or the proposal that was brought during the Vienna Congress was the territory Poland that was acquired by Napoleon during his reign was shared among the great powers who defeated him, that were Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia. So Poland, which is much near to Prussia, Austria, and Russia, so these three great powers took control over Poland. Even though Poland no longer existed as an independent territory, national feelings were kept alive through music and language. Karol Kurpinski celebrated national struggle through operas and music, turning folk dances like the Polonaise and mazurka into national symbols. So this can again be asked as a 1 mark question. Who was the person who celebrated national struggle through operas and music? It was Mr. Karol Kurpinski. And he also turned folk dances like Polonaise and mazurka into nationalist symbols. Poland used language as a weapon of national resistance. For example, struggle for Polish language over Russian language in Poland. So how this happened? So what happened was the church people, which refers to the clergymen, the popes, the bishops, and the other clergy members, they started preaching to the public in Polish language. Even though the government forced them to speak only Russian and preach in Russian language, they did not obey to those rules and regulations, and they started preaching to all the public in Polish language. A large number of priests and bishops were put in jail or sent to Siberia by the Russian authorities for the refusal to preach in Russian. So, this was the outcome. So, those clergymen and the popes, priests, and bishops were either put in jail or sent to Siberia. Siberia is a very cold region, so they were sent there as a punishment. The use of Polish came to be seen as a symbol of the struggle against the Russian dominance. So, this is how the vernacular language played a key role in developing the nationalist sentiments of the people. So, if this question is asked, all these points must be covered. The massacre at Chaos. So, this is the picture that is given in our textbook. This picture was painted by a French artist known as Eugene Delacroix. He was a famous artist of that time. So, what he has depicted here is what we will see now. The French painter Delacroix was one of the most important French romantic painters of that time. This huge painting depicts an incident in which 20,000 Greeks were said to have been killed by Turks on the island of Chios. By dramatizing the incident, focusing on the suffering of women and children, and using vivid colors, Delacroix sought to appeal to the emotions of the spectators and create sympathy for the Greeks. So basically, the Greeks had a struggle against the Turks. This basically refers to the Greek War of Independence. During that time, as Ottoman Empire had its main base in Turkey, they had a war between the Greek people and people who belonged to Turkey. There was a war, and in which the Greek people were defeated very badly. And we know in any war there will be a lot of destruction. So in this picture, Delacroix has beautifully painted that situation. Even though it is a very sad situation, using vivid colors, he has touched the theme and depicted it through this picture. This can again be asked as a 1 mark question. What does they will directly give this picture in the question paper and ask what does this picture depict? It depicts the massacre at Chios, which Chios is an island which is located near Turkey. They can also ask who painted this picture. It was painted by Eugene Delacroix, who was a French romantic painter. So now let's move on to the next topic. Hunger, hardship, and popular revolt. That is our next topic. So let's see. The 1830s were years of great economic hardship in Europe. The first half of the 19th century saw an enormous increase in population all over Europe. So, during the first half of the 19th century, there was sudden increase in the population all over Europe in most of the parts. In most countries, there were more job seekers than the number of jobs. So, more than the number of vacancies, there were a lot of job seekers. This led to unemployment. Population from rural areas migrated to the cities to live in overcrowded slums. So many people started moving from rural areas to the cities and towns, which led to the creation of overcrowded slums. Small producers in towns were often faced with stiff competition from imports of cheap machine made goods from England, where industrialization was more advanced than on the continent. So, as we saw in our first session, I had mentioned clearly on that the area, when we divide Europe into three parts, the area surrounding England, uh, first industrialization took place in that region only. So during this time, as the manufacturing in England happened in a very rapid manner, the small producers could not compete with the machine made goods. This was especially so in textile production, which was carried out mainly in homes or small workshops and was only partly mechanized. So, industrialization, as soon as it happened, the full cloth production process was mechanized. So, that is, it was done by machines. So, it did not require much of the intervention of human beings. But the small producers, only for few processes, they used machines. Otherwise, it was all done by hand. So they couldn't compete with the machine made goods. In those regions of Europe where the aristocracy still enjoyed power, peasants struggled under the burden of feudal dues and obligation. So these feudal dues was one another way through which the aristocracy extracted money from the peasants. So during that time, the peasants were tortured very badly and they were put uh, a lot of restrictions by the aristocracy. The rise of food prices or a year of bad harvest led to widespread pauperism in the town and country. So when there was a sudden increase in food prices or there was a bad harvest, so these situations basically added fuel to the fire, and this led to widespread pauperism. That is, people didn't even have food to eat. There was a lot of food shortages. So now let's move on to the next slide. In 1848, widespread food shortages and unemployment brought the population of Paris out on the roads. Barricades were erected and Louis Philippe was forced to flee. National Assembly was proclaimed. France became a republic. Suffrage to all adult males above 21 was granted. National workshops were set up to provide employment. So in the year 1848, due to widespread food shortage and unemployment, it brought the population of Paris out on the roads. Barricades were erected, and their constitutional head, who was put in the during the July Revolution, was forced to flee. And National Assembly. So this National Assembly governed uh, the France part before, like just after the French Revolution and before the reign of Maximilian Robespierre. So again, this National Assembly was proclaimed through voting, and all adult males above 21 were given the right to vote. National workshops were set up by this National Assembly government to provide employment for those who did not have jobs. So this picture depicts what happened. So now let's move on to the next slide. Silesian Revolt of 1845. The main issue that happened was between the cotton contractors and the cotton weavers. So during that time, these cotton weavers used to get a lot of orders from contractors who supplied them raw materials, and in return they had to make finished textiles and give it to them. So what happened was, contractors supplied them raw material and gave them orders for finished textiles, but drastically reduced their payments. So slowly the contractors started reducing the payments that they had to pay to the cotton weavers. Crowd of weavers marched to the mansion of their contractor demanding higher wages. So due to this, these weavers marched to the mansion of their contractors demanding for more wages. So what outcomes it led? So what were the outcomes? It made the weavers to suffer. Weavers' demand were not considered. They were treated with scorn and threats alternatively. So the weavers were threatened by these contractors, and 11 weavers were shot. These were the three main outcomes. This can be asked as a 3-mark question. Describe the Silesian Revolt of 1845. So for that, all these 6 points has to be written. So what was their issue? what were the events and what were the outcomes. Now let's move on to our next slide. 1848, the revolution of the liberals. This is again a very important topic. So let's. Who were liberals? First, we in the first session I had explained in brief on the ideology of liberalism. So generally, whoever follows liberalism and whoever stood by it are known as liberals. It's comprised of educated middle class people, and these people often belong to Germany, Italy, Poland, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, who led the revolution in Europe. So these people led the liberal revolution in Europe. Events of February 1848 in France. This event refers to what happened in France, which we looked in the previous slides, had brought about the abdication of the monarch. So Louis Philippe fled. That's what they are referring to here. And a republic based on universal male suffrage had been proclaimed. That is, the National Assembly was proclaimed. In other parts of Europe, such as Germany, Italy, Poland, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, men and women of the liberal middle classes combined their demands for constitutionalism with national unification. So their main demands of the liberals during that time was constitutionalism and national unification. So as we discussed earlier, during that time Europe was divided into many cantons, duchies, states, and few parts even remained aloof. So these parts had to be integrated and unified. So national unification was also one of their main demand. They took advantage of the growing popular unrest to push their demands. So now let's move to the next slide. When did the revolution start? Parallel to the revolts by peasants and workers in Europe in 1848, the liberal revolution also occurred. What was the reason for the revolt? First of all, constitution. The need for a constitution was one of the main uh, aim of the liberals. The other reasons were freedom of press. So the autocratic monarchical regime had a huge control over the press, and they put a lot of restrictions as well, such that only news that were good for the aristocratic people were published, and the views of the liberals could be suppressed. That's why they took control over the press, and this was one of the main reason why the revolt happened. And there was the main another reason was freedom of association. So during that time the government put a lot of restrictions and regulations for these associations. They couldn't do their activities liberally. So freedom of association was another reason. Abolition of monarchy. This was the main aim of the liberals. They were completely against the monarchical regime, and they wanted a democratic regime. And they also wanted to achieve a republic based on universal male suffrage. So these were the main reasons why the revolt happened. Now let us look at the case of Germany. This was one such liberal revolution. That's what I'm going to describe in this slide. This is one such liberal revolution that happened in Germany. Middle class people came together in city of Frankfurt and voted for an all German National Assembly. So during that time, all German National Assembly was one famous political institution at that time, and many middle class people here refers to the majority of liberals, came together in city of Frankfurt and they voted for this all German National Assembly. On 18th May, 831 elected representatives marched on a peaceful procession to Frankfurt Parliament, which was convened in the church of St. Paul. So these 831 elected members marched on a peaceful procession to the Frankfurt Parliament, which was convened in the St. Paul Church. They draft constitution for a German headed by a monarchy subject to a parliament. So basically, this statement here refers to that they had created a constitutional in which there was a provision for the monarchy as well. So basically, they are referring to constitutional monarchy system is what the main background behind this. They offered the crown to Frederick William, the King of Prussia, but he rejected the proposal and joined other monarchs to oppose the elected assembly. So these 831 elected representatives in that St. Paul Church, they offered the crown along with the constitution, and they gave Frederick William a chance to be their monarch subject to that constitution. But what Frederick William, the monarch, did was he rejected that proposal and he joined the monarchs to oppose this elected assembly. He was against this elected assembly and he was not ready for the system of constitutional monarchy. He wants to rule. That was his belief. The parliament consequently lost the middle class support. So the main support the parliament had was the middle class and the liberals. But slowly, as none of the demands were met, and the Frederick William IV, the King of Prussia, also rejected the proposal. Slowly, it lost its support. In the end, troops were called by the King of Prussia, that is Frederick William. He called the troops, and the assembly was forced to disband. So finally, uh, the assembly was disbanded. So this is the picture of the Frankfurt Parliament. This is again a very important 1 mark question. They'll directly give this picture and ask, what does the picture depict? It depicts the Frankfurt Parliament, which was convened at the Church of St. Paul. So here we can see the German flag that has been placed all over here. And up to date, this German flag is only followed in Germany. This flag was designed during the Liberal Nationalist Revolution only. Now let us look at women's participation in these revolutions. They formed their own political organizations or associations. They founded newspaper and take part in political meetings and demonstrations. So they founded many newspapers and they also took part in political meetings and demonstrations. They did these activities such that even other women folk uh, of that part joined with them and they also gathered sufficient support. Still denied suffrage rights during the election of the assembly. So when these 831 elected representatives, when they were elected, women were not given the voting rights. So women did not vote. They got that majority. Only men voted. That's how they got that majority. Effect of the revolt. Conservatives failed to restore the old order. Conservatives could not restore the old monarchical regime, and they also felt that if at least few demands of these liberal nationalists are not met, they could never end the revolution and the repression. So they granted many concessions. That is what is mentioned in this line. Monarchs began to realize the cycles of revolution and repression could only be ended by granting concessions to the liberal nationalist revolutionaries. So what concessions they gave? Now that we will look in this box. Steps to avoid another revolt. Under this title, these steps were taken. These were the concessions that were granted. Hence, in the years after 1848, the autocratic monarchies of Central and Eastern Europe began to introduce the changes that had already taken place in Western Europe before 1815. So before 1815, few changes took place in Western Europe. Those same changes had also been introduced or in this part of Europe. Serfdom and bonded labor were abolished both in the Habsburg dominions and in Russia. So, serfdom and bonded labor were two main things through which the peasantry group was tortured. So, these two systems were abolished, which is again a very good thing. The Habsburg rulers granted more autonomy to the Hungarians in 1867. So these are the three main concessions that were given. This can be asked as a 2 mark question, and effects of revolt and women's participation could be asked as a 3 mark question. So with this, I would like to end today's session. I hope you all liked my explanation. As I said earlier, the explanatory session for this chapter will come in 4 parts, and as soon as all the 4 parts are uploaded, I'll be uploading a practice paper exclusively for this chapter under the shorts. Under the shorts, I will be uploading that. So make the best use of it. Thank you very much. Please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also click the bell icon. Thank you very much.